So picture this. What if you woke up one morning and the sun just felt wrong? Like it was turned down. Not an eclipse, not just a cloudy day, but for an entire year, the sky is stuck behind this strange sun-blocking veil. We're going to dive into this because back in 536 AD, that wasn't a what if. It's exactly what happened. And it kicked off what a lot of historians now say was the single worst period to be a living human being.
And hey, that's not science fiction. That's a real quote from a Roman historian, Procopius, who saw it with his own two eyes. I mean, can you even imagine that kind of deep, primal fear? The sun, the thing that gives us life, warmth, everything, and it suddenly looks like a pale, useless moon. This one sentence, written over 1,500 years ago, is basically the chilling first chapter in a huge global mystery.
Procopius called the dimming sun a most dread portent. And wow, he couldn't have been more right. For 18 long, agonizing months, this weird, dark fog just shrouded huge parts of the northern hemisphere. So let's get into what people on the ground, everywhere from Ireland to China, were actually seeing and feeling.
You know, what's absolutely wild about this is how consistent all these stories are, coming from totally different parts of the world that had no contact with each other. Over in Rome, a statesman named Cassiodorus wrote that the sun had this bizarre bluish color. And then he adds this detail that just gives me chills. At high noon, people cast no shadows. Just think about that for a second. The sun is right above your head, and you don't even leave a mark on the ground. It was like the fundamental rules of the world had just broken.
Okay, so a dim, shadowless sun is scary enough, right? But the effects on the ground were immediate, and they were absolutely devastating. Because when the sun's warmth can't actually reach the earth, you get something terrifying. A summer that just never shows up.
Now that number might not look like a huge deal to us today, but a drop of up to 2.5 degrees Celsius on average is a complete and utter catastrophe for any society that relies on farming. It's the difference between a harvest that feeds everyone and fields full of dead, rotting plants. This sudden, shocking cold snap was the trigger for absolutely everything that was about to go wrong.
And this is where you see just how global this disaster was. We've got records of snow falling in China in the middle of August, completely wiping out their harvest. Ancient Irish chronicles talk about a failure of bread that went on for 3 whole years. From Europe all the way to Peru, where the Mache civilization was hit by a massive drought, people were starving. The very foundation of their world, food, had just vanished.
For centuries, nobody knew what caused this. Was it an act of God, a comet? It was a total mystery. It took modern science and some pretty incredible detective work to finally find the smoking gun and solve this 1,500-year-old cold case.
And the crime scene? Well, it turns out it was perfectly preserved in some of the most remote places you can imagine. To figure out what happened in 536, scientists had to look where the evidence would be trapped, completely untouched for millennia.
So how'd they crack the case? Well, first, they looked at ancient tree rings from Irish oaks and found that for the year 536, the trees barely grew at all. That was clue number 1. Then they drilled these super deep ice cores in Greenland and Antarctica and found something amazing, a distinct layer of sulfate particles, basically a chemical fingerprint of a massive volcanic eruption dated precisely to the spring of 536. But the final clue, the real smoking gun, came from a Swiss glacier. Tiny shards of volcanic glass. That confirmed it. One single cataclysmic eruption was the culprit.
What happened next is something we now call a volcanic winter. And it's pretty straightforward, really. A giant volcano erupts, blasting millions of tons of sulfur way up into the stratosphere. Up there, it mixes with water and forms this huge cloud of tiny particles that act like a giant mirror, reflecting sunlight back into space. And with less sunlight reaching the ground, temperatures just plummet. So, you see, it's this terrifyingly simple chain reaction. A massive volcano, probably somewhere in Iceland, erupts. That aerosol cloud spreads across the northern hemisphere, blocking the sun. Global temperatures fall off a cliff. And just like that, the world's food supply collapses, leading to starvation on a massive scale.
And just when you think it couldn't possibly get any worse, it did. See, 536 wasn't a one-and-done event. It was just the first punch in a brutal combination. It was followed by 2 more huge eruptions in 540 and 547. So this wasn't just a bad year. It was the start of a century-long climate crisis we now call the Late Antique Little Ice Age. It kicked off the coldest decade in over 2,000 years.
So humanity is on its knees. People are cold, they're in the dark, they're starving. And right at that moment of maximum weakness, a new invisible killer starts to move across the land.
And this is really the second act of the catastrophe. The volcanic winter and the famine had weakened hundreds of millions of people. Economies were shattered, societies were totally vulnerable. And into that broken world comes one of the most infamous diseases in all of human history.
In the year 541, just 5 years after the sun went dim, the Bubonic Plague explodes out of Egypt. It's caused by the same bacterium, Yersinia pestis, that would later cause the Black Death. This was the first Great Plague pandemic, and we call it the Plague of Justinian, named after the Roman emperor who actually got it himself and somehow miraculously survived.
And here is the absolutely crucial link between these two disasters. A plague is always going to be horrific, but when it hits a population that's been starving for 5 straight years, their immune systems just don't stand a chance. The death rate wasn't just high, it was apocalyptic. So the volcano didn't just cause a famine, it literally set the stage for the plague to just tear through humanity.
Following the Roman trade routes, the plague just spread like wildfire. By 542, it was in Constantinople, the biggest city in the world at the time, and it was killing thousands of people every single day. It swept across the Mediterranean, it crippled the Persian Empire, and it even made its way to the shores of Britain and Ireland. And it wasn't just one wave. It kept coming back, again and again, for the next 200 years.
So when you put all of that together, the volcanic winter, a century of cold, worldwide famine, and a relentless, terrifying pandemic, what you have is the perfect storm for a complete and total reshaping of the human world.
And this gets us to a really powerful idea. We usually think of the fall of Rome and the start of the Dark Ages as being all about armies and politics and kings. But the evidence is pretty clear now that, at its heart, this was actually a story about climate change. A natural disaster is what pushed the ancient world right off a cliff.
And you can see the fallout everywhere you look. The Eastern Roman Empire was crippled, it lost huge amounts of territory. Its great enemy, the Sasanian Empire in Persia, was hit just as hard. And look at this detail from Scandinavia, it's amazing. Archaeologists have found all these hoards of gold from this exact period. The theory is that people were making desperate sacrifices to their gods to try and end the Thimble Winter and bring back the sun. An entire world order was just broken and remade by the web. Which brings us right back to where we started. The historian Michael McCormick, who was actually on the team that found that volcanic evidence in the glacier, he does not mince words. Looking at the perfect storm of climate disaster, famine, and plague, he calls 536 the beginning of one of the worst periods to be alive, if not the absolute worst year.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty sobering thought. The story of 536 is this humbling reminder of just how fragile our whole civilization is, how completely dependent we are on a stable climate. It really makes you wonder, with all our technology and our global supply chains, how would we handle a year without a summer today?